There are some secrets that fester, hidden not just in the shadows of memory, but in the very fabric of our lives, waiting for the slightest tremor to rip them open. And then there are secrets that stand in plain sight, mocking us with their blatant presence, daring us to look closer. This is a story of that latter, more insidious kind of secret, a truth so audacious, so utterly unbelievable, that it hid behind the mundane curtain of everyday life for decades. It's a story that unfolds not in a grand, dramatic reveal, but in the quiet, creeping realization that the world you thought you knew, the people you loved, were all built on a foundation of sand. Imagine a life that feels complete. Not perfect, perhaps, but certainly full. That was the life of Elara Vance. Elara, a woman in her late 40s, had the kind of luminous smile that lit up any room, a smile that seemed to defy the ordinary challenges of life. She was an artist, her studio a vibrant explosion of color and creativity, nestled in a charming, older home in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac. Her husband, Marcus, a genial, steady presence with laugh lines around his warm eyes, was a history professor at the local university. Their 2 children, Liam and Chloe, were bright, inquisitive teenagers, filling their home with the joyful chaos of youth. They were, by all outward appearances, the quintessential American family, living the dream. Elara had always known she was adopted. It was never a secret, not in their home. Her parents, Eleanor and Arthur Vance, had told her early on, with gentle words and endless love, that she was chosen, special. They were a comforting, unwavering presence throughout her childhood, pillars of wisdom and affection. Eleanor, with her silver hair always impeccably styled and her kind, knowing gaze, had been a rock. Arthur, a retired engineer, was the steady hand, the quiet observer who always seemed to know just what to say. Elara never felt a void, never felt like anything was missing. Her adoption was simply a fact of her existence, as natural as the color of her eyes. She loved her parents fiercely, believed herself blessed to have them. This seemingly settled truth was the very canvas upon which an unimaginable deception was meticulously painted. Their neighborhood was a tapestry of familiar faces, a collection of homes where doors were often left unlocked and impromptu barbecues were a summer staple. And directly next door, separated by nothing more than a well-manicured hedge and a shared driveway, lived the Hayes family. Old Samuel Hayes, a man with a booming laugh and a perpetual twinkle in his eye, had lived in that house since before Elara was born. He was the neighborhood's unofficial mayor, always tending to his immaculate rose garden, his booming greetings echoing down the street. His wife, Beatrice, a slender woman with a surprisingly sharp wit and an encyclopedic knowledge of local gossip, was a constant presence, baking cookies for school fundraisers and offering unsolicited, but often valuable, advice. Their daughter, Lorelei, was a few years older than Elara, a vivacious woman with a cascade of fiery red curls and an adventurous spirit. Lorelei had been Elara's first friend, her confidant through scraped knees and teenage crushes. Their bond forged in countless hours spent playing in each other's backyards, whispering secrets across the fence. They were practically sisters, their lives intertwined in the effortless way only childhood friendships can achieve. Lorelei eventually moved away to pursue a career in environmental law, but their friendship endured, nurtured by regular phone calls and occasional visits. The Hayes family was, in every sense, an extension of Elara's own. They were the comforting backdrop to her ordinary, beautiful life. The first crack in Elara's carefully constructed reality appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a hairline fracture in a valuable vase. It wasn't a sudden revelation, no dramatic phone call or unearthed letter. It was a sensation, a whisper of unease that began to grow louder. It started with an old photograph. Elara was cleaning out her mother Eleanor's attic after Eleanor's passing, a bittersweet task filled with dusty memories and forgotten treasures. Tucked away in a shoebox filled with old postcards and dried flowers, she found a faded sepia photograph. It was a picture of a young woman, her face obscured by shadows, holding a swaddled infant. The woman's hair was long and dark, her posture slumped, as if burdened by an immense weight. What caught Elara's eye, what sent a shiver down her spine, was not the woman, but the background. Behind her, blurry but undeniably recognizable, was the distinctive facade of the house next door, the Hayes residence. Why would this picture be in her mother's possession? And who was the woman? Eleanor had always been meticulous about labeling her photographs. Yet this one was unmarked, anonymous. It was an anomaly, a tiny discordant note in the symphony of her mother's organized life. Elara dismissed it at first. Perhaps it was just a random picture, a memento of a neighbor from years ago. But the image gnawed at her. She tried to recall if she had ever seen her mother with that particular woman, but nothing came to mind. The mystery of the photograph was compounded by a series of increasingly strange encounters. Samuel Hayes, now quite elderly and a little frail, began to behave oddly. He would sometimes look at Elara with an intensity that unsettled her, a profound sadness in his eyes that she couldn't quite decipher. He'd murmur things, half-formed sentences about the past and regrets, before his wife Beatrice would gently redirect him, her own expression unreadable. One afternoon, while helping Samuel prune his roses, Elara casually mentioned the old photograph. A strange tremor passed through Samuel's hand, and he dropped his clippers. Beatrice, who had just emerged from her kitchen with a plate of cookies, froze. The air thickened, suddenly heavy with unspoken words. Beatrice quickly changed the subject, her voice a little too bright, her movements a little too quick. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but Elara, with her artist's eye for detail, noticed it. A seed of suspicion, tiny and insidious, began to sprout. The unease deepened when Elara visited Lorelei, who had returned home for a brief visit. While looking through Lorelei's old photo albums, they stumbled upon a picture of Lorelei as a toddler, standing in front of her house. In the background, partially obscured, was a woman who looked remarkably similar to the one in Elara's attic photograph. It was a fleeting glimpse, but the resemblance was striking. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. "Who is that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Lorelei peered at the image, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Oh, that's an old family friend, I think," she said, too quickly, too vaguely. The answer felt rehearsed, almost dismissive. The pieces, though still disparate, were beginning to align in a disquieting pattern. The unmarked photograph, Samuel's strange pronouncements, Beatrice's sudden evasiveness, Lorelei's dismissive answer, each a faint brushstroke on a canvas that was slowly revealing a different, darker picture of her past. Elara, who had always embraced her adoption as a simple fact, now felt a prickling sensation, a nascent suspicion that there was far more to her origins than she had ever been told. The comfortable narrative of her life was starting to unravel, thread by painful thread, and the truth, she suspected, lay disturbingly close to home. The subtle unease that had settled over Elara's life began to morph into something more concrete, a persistent gnawing suspicion that refused to be silenced. The old photograph, the hushed conversations, the veiled glances from the Hayes family, these were no longer isolated incidents. They were threads, slowly, meticulously, weaving a tapestry of doubt. Elara found herself scrutinizing every interaction, every passing comment, searching for hidden meanings, for the truth that seemed to hover just beneath the surface of polite conversation. Her artistic sensibilities, usually a source of joy and expression, now turned inward, dissecting the nuances of human behavior, much like she would analyze the layers of paint on a canvas. The vibrant colors of her life seemed to dim slightly, overshadowed by this growing shadow. She found herself making excuses to spend more time next door, lingering in the Hayes garden, offering to help with chores, anything to be in their presence, to observe. Samuel, increasingly frail, would often drift into moments of lucidity mixed with confusion. One afternoon, as Elara helped him prune his beloved rose bushes, he looked at her with tears welling in his eyes. "You were always so bright, so full of life, just like her," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We tried, Elara. We truly tried to make it right." Elara's heart pounded. "Make what right, Samuel?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. But before he could answer, Beatrice appeared, her presence as sudden and unyielding as a stone wall. "Samuel, dear, you're getting tired," she interjected, her voice firm, almost brittle. She ushered him inside, casting a quick, uneasy glance at Elara, a look that spoke volumes of unspoken warnings. Elara stood frozen, the clippers still in her hand, the fragrant scent of roses suddenly cloying. Just like her. Who was her? And what had they tried to make right? The questions echoed in her mind, a relentless drumbeat. The most jarring incident occurred during a neighborhood block party. Marcus, ever the convivial host, was grilling burgers while Elara circulated, making small talk. She noticed Beatrice Hayes watching her from across the yard, her gaze intense, almost mournful. As Elara turned to offer her a drink, Beatrice approached, her usually composed demeanor fractured by an unusual agitation. "Elara," she began, her voice low, almost a plea. "You must understand, some things are best left undisturbed. The past, it can be a cruel master." Her words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. Before Elara could formulate a response, Lorelei, arriving late, swept in, her cheerful greeting breaking the tension. Lorelei, with her usual effervescence, launched into a story about a recent environmental project, effectively derailing any further serious conversation. But Elara couldn't shake Beatrice's words. Cruel master. What was so cruel about her past? Why were they so desperate to keep it buried? The weight of these unspoken truths began to take a toll. Elara found herself withdrawn, lost in thought, even in the midst of her vibrant family life. Marcus, ever perceptive, noticed the change. "Is everything all right, sweetheart?" he'd ask, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem distant." Elara would offer a vague answer, a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. How could she explain the insidious feeling that her entire existence was a carefully constructed facade, meticulously maintained by those closest to her? How could she tell him that the loving family next door, practically an extension of their own, might be holding the key to a deeply disturbing secret about her origins? She felt a profound loneliness, isolated by a mystery that only she seemed to perceive. The thought of confronting Eleanor and Arthur, even in her imagination, filled her with a paralyzing dread. They had been her anchors, her safe harbor. To question their honesty, their love, felt like a betrayal of the highest order. One particularly restless night, unable to sleep, Elara found herself drawn to her old photo albums, the ones from her childhood. She meticulously examined every picture, searching for clues, for anything that seemed out of place. And then she saw it, a seemingly innocent snapshot of a picnic in the park. Young Elara, perhaps 6 years old, was laughing, smeared with watermelon juice. Standing slightly behind her, a protective hand on her shoulder, was Eleanor. And in the background, a few feet away, stood Lorelei's mother, Beatrice, holding a small, intricately carved wooden bird. The same bird Elara had seen countless times in Lorelei's childhood room, a treasured keepsake. What struck Elara was not just Beatrice's presence, but the intensity of her gaze. She wasn't looking at the picnic or at Eleanor. She was looking at Elara, her expression a complex mixture of longing and sorrow. It was a look that transcended simple neighborly affection. It was the look of a mother. The realization hit Elara with the force of a physical blow. It was a silent scream within her, a terrifying, exhilarating epiphany. Beatrice Hayes wasn't just a neighbor. She was her mother. The woman who had given birth to her, who had carried her, had lived next door to her for her entire life, just a hedge away. The implications were staggering, monumental. Every memory, every cherished moment, every seemingly innocent interaction with the Hayes family suddenly took on a new, horrifying meaning. Their kindness, their generosity, their constant presence. It wasn't just neighborly affection. It was the desperate, yearning love of a family kept forcibly apart. A love that had manifested as quiet observation, as whispered warnings, as an unspoken plea for understanding. The warmth she had always felt for Lorelai, her oldest, dearest friend, was now tainted by the horrifying possibility that Lorelai was not just a friend, but her biological sister. The irony was so cruel, so perfectly tragic, it almost felt like a twisted joke. Her real family, the people who shared her blood, her genetic makeup, had been literally within arm's reach for 5 decades, while she remained blissfully unaware, living a life built on a foundation of omission and secrecy. The revelation was not a gentle unfolding, but a violent tearing, ripping apart the fabric of her reality. The quiet suburban street, the comforting familiarity of her neighborhood, now felt like a carefully constructed prison, a gilded cage built on a lie. And the most chilling thought of all, if Beatrice was her mother, then who was the woman in the faded photograph from the attic? The woman with the dark hair, holding a swaddled infant, standing in front of the Hayes house? The answer, she knew instinctively, would only deepen the abyss of this unfolding nightmare. The world, as Elara knew it, had shattered into a million sharp pieces, each reflecting a distorted image of her past. The revelation that Beatrice Hayes, her next-door neighbor, the woman who had baked her cookies and offered her unsolicited advice for decades, was her biological mother, was a seismic event. It wasn't just a truth. It was a detonation, obliterating every preconceived notion she held about her identity, her family, and the very nature of love and betrayal. The initial shock gave way to a cold, burning anger, a sense of profound injustice. How could this have happened? How could such a monumental secret have been kept from her for half a century, by the very people she loved and trusted most? She began to replay every interaction, every word, every gesture. The way Samuel Hayes would look at her with such profound sadness, the way Beatrice's voice would catch when she spoke of the past, Lorelai's carefully vague answers. It all coalesced into a horrifying mosaic of deliberate deception. Her adoptive parents, Eleanor and Arthur, who had always been paragons of honesty and love, now appeared as architects of a devastating lie. The warmth of their home, the comfort of their embrace, now felt tainted, a beautiful prison built on a foundation of stolen truth. The irony was so brutal it was almost cinematic. Her biological family, the one she had unknowingly longed for, had resided literally a few feet away, their lives mirroring hers, yet separated by an invisible, impenetrable wall of secrecy. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Elara found herself unable to confront anyone directly. The fear of what she might uncover, the fear of irrevocably damaging the relationships she still held dear, was paralyzing. Instead, she became a silent detective, sifting through old documents, photo albums, anything that might offer a clue. The faded sepia photograph from Eleanor's attic, the one of the woman holding a baby in front of the Hayes house, now haunted her. If Beatrice was her mother, then who was this other woman? The image, once a vague curiosity, was now a critical piece of the puzzle, a shadowy figure at the periphery of her darkest suspicions. She found herself staring at it for hours, trying to discern details from the blurred features, searching for any connection. The answers, when they began to surface, were not in grand revelations, but in the subtle shifts of conversation, the carefully guarded words, the sudden silences. Elara visited Lorelai, ostensibly for a casual catch-up. She carefully steered the conversation to family history, to old stories about their childhoods. "Remember that old picture of you as a baby, with that woman in the background?" Elara asked, her voice deliberately light. Lorelai stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that old thing? Probably just some distant relative or something," she mumbled, quickly changing the subject to her current work projects. But Elara pressed on, her resolve hardening. "She looked a lot like someone. I just can't place it." Lorelai's eyes darted away, a telltale sign of discomfort. "Honestly, Elara, it was so long ago, who knows?" The evasiveness was a confirmation in itself. Lorelai knew. She was complicit, perhaps unwillingly, in this grand deception. The thought twisted a knife in Elara's heart. Her closest friend, her practically sister, had been carrying this secret for years, watching Elara live a life built on a lie. The true depths of the deception began to unravel during a seemingly innocuous visit to Samuel Hayes. His health had declined significantly, and he was often disoriented. Elara found him alone one afternoon, sitting in his armchair, staring out the window at his rose garden. She sat beside him, gently holding his frail hand. "Samuel," she began, her voice soft but firm, "I need you to tell me about that photograph, the one with the woman and the baby, in front of your house." A flicker of awareness, a spark of memory, ignited in his clouded eyes. He squeezed her hand, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "The girl! Poor Adeline," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "She was so young, so broken-hearted. They told us it was for the best." Elara leaned closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Who was Adeline, Samuel? And who told you what?" He struggled for words, the effort visibly painful. "Your mother, Beatrice. She loved you so much. But Eleanor, she promised a better life." He drifted off, his eyes closing, exhaustion washing over him. The name Adeline struck Elara like a lightning bolt. It resonated with a chilling familiarity, though she couldn't place it. And then, as if a dam had broken, the pieces clicked into place. She remembered a faded newspaper clipping, tucked away in an old family album of Eleanor's, a story about a local high school girl who had run away, a brief mention of a tragic circumstance. The article had been so generic, so fleeting, that Elara had never paid it much mind. But now, with Samuel's fragmented words, a terrifying possibility began to form. Adeline, the young woman in the photograph, the girl who ran away, was she her biological mother? And if so, why had Beatrice raised her? And why had Eleanor and Arthur taken her in? The conspiracy deepened, stretching beyond a simple adoption to something far more complex, far more agonizing. Elara's rage, once a simmering ember, now roared into a full-blown inferno. She felt manipulated, betrayed by every single person she had ever loved. The very air around her seemed to vibrate with the weight of these unspoken truths. The comfortable illusion of her life had been stripped away, revealing a harsh, brutal reality. She was not merely adopted. She was the product of a secret pact, a clandestine arrangement orchestrated by the very people who claimed to love her. The pain was almost unbearable, a physical ache in her chest. She yearned for answers, for the complete, unvarnished truth, no matter how devastating. The next step, she knew, would be the hardest. It would mean confronting the two women who held the keys to her past. Lorelei, her childhood friend, her biological sister, and Beatrice, the woman who had watched her grow up from next door, her own mother. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either heal or utterly destroy the shattered remnants of her family. The quiet rage that had simmered within Elara finally reached its boiling point. The fragmented whispers from Samuel, the evasions from Lorelei, the cryptic warnings from Beatrice. They had woven a narrative so shocking, so deeply personal, that Elara could no longer bear the weight of it alone. The truth, like a relentless predator, was closing in, demanding to be seen. Armed with the faded photograph of Adeline and the swaddled infant, and the agonizing fragments of Samuel's confession, Elara knew she had to confront the source, the woman who had nurtured her from next door, the woman who was her biological mother, Beatrice Hayes. The air in Beatrice's living room was thick with unspoken words, a palpable tension that crackled between the two women. Elara held out the photograph, her hand trembling slightly. "Who is this, Beatrice?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the storm raging inside her. Beatrice, now visibly frail, her eyes clouded with an ancient sorrow, took the photograph. Her fingers traced the shadowy outline of the young woman's face, a sigh escaping her lips. "Adeline," she whispered, the name a painful echo. "My sister, your biological mother." The confession, though anticipated, still hit Elara with a sickening jolt. Her sister, Lorelei's aunt. The intricate web of lies, the cruel twists of fate, were almost too much to comprehend. Beatrice, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, began to unravel the story. a tragic tale of forbidden love, desperate choices, and profound sacrifice. Adeline, a vibrant, headstrong young woman, had fallen deeply in love with a man from the wrong side of the tracks, a love her conservative parents, Samuel and Beatrice's father, vehemently disapproved of. She became pregnant, a devastating scandal in their tight-knit community in the late 1970s. The family, particularly Beatrice, had tried to protect Adeline, to shelter her from the judgment. But Adeline, fiercely independent, refused to give up the baby, even when her lover abandoned her. "We were desperate, Elara," Beatrice confessed, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "My parents were devastated, but I made a promise to Adeline. I would protect her baby no matter what." The plan, orchestrated in hushed tones and clandestine meetings, was born out of desperation and a misguided sense of protection. Eleanor and Arthur Vance, who had recently moved into the neighborhood and were struggling with infertility, were looking to adopt. Beatrice, seeing their kindness and stability, saw a way out. Adeline, consumed by shame and the immense burden of raising a child alone, agreed to give up her baby, but only if Beatrice, her beloved sister, would be nearby, a secret guardian angel watching over her child. "Adeline couldn't bear to leave you completely," Beatrice sobbed. "But she also knew she couldn't give you the life you deserved. She was so young, so broken. She vanished soon after, overwhelmed by it all. We never heard from her again, not truly." The Vances, eager for a child, had agreed to the clandestine arrangement, promising to raise Elara as their own, never revealing the truth of her origins, believing it would spare her pain. They moved into the house next door, a perfect, agonizingly close proximity. For 5 decades, Beatrice, Samuel, and Lorelei had watched Elara grow, witnessed her milestones, celebrated her triumphs, all while carrying the immense weight of their secret, a silent, daily torment. They had been shadows in her life, silent observers, yearning to embrace her as their own. "Every time I saw you, Elara," Beatrice choked out. "Every time I saw you play in the yard, every time you came over for cookies, my heart ached. But I honored my promise to Adeline. I thought I was protecting you." The truth was a bitter pill, coated in layers of good intentions and heartbreaking sacrifices. Elara listened, her emotions a chaotic maelstrom of anger, grief, and a strange, nascent understanding. She looked at Beatrice, the woman who was her mother, and saw not a villain, but a woman trapped by circumstances, driven by love and an impossible promise. The tears that finally fell were not just for herself, but for Adeline, her young mother who had been forced to vanish, and for Beatrice, who had endured a lifetime of silent yearning. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of raw emotion and difficult conversations. Elara confronted Lorelei, not with accusation, but with a desperate plea for understanding. Lorelei, tears streaming down her face, confessed her own guilt, her own lifelong burden of the secret. She had always known, had always wished for the truth to be revealed, but had been bound by her parents' promises and the fear of shattering Elara's world. The truth, in its rawest form, began a slow, painful process of healing. Elara's relationship with Marcus and her children, initially strained by her emotional turmoil, gradually began to mend as she shared the devastating revelation. They stood by her, offering unwavering support as she navigated this uncharted territory of her identity. The path forward was not clear, nor was it easy. Elara wrestled with her feelings towards Eleanor and Arthur. The love they had shown her was undeniable, real, profound. Yet, the deception, however well-intentioned, was a wound that would take time to heal. She began to understand the complex tapestry of human motives, the desperate choices people make out of love, fear, and a misguided sense of protection. The anger slowly began to recede, replaced by a quiet sorrow and a burgeoning sense of compassion. Elara's story, a testament to the enduring power of secrets and the unexpected ways truth can emerge, is a stark reminder that sometimes the most profound revelations are hidden not in distant lands or forgotten archives, but right next door. It's a story about the messy, complicated, often heartbreaking reality of family, and the extraordinary resilience of the human heart. And as you reflect on Elara's journey, on the unimaginable twists and turns her life took, remember that sometimes the most astonishing tales are those unfolding silently around us, waiting for the brave soul to uncover them. If Elara's journey resonated with you, if it made you question the secrets that might be lingering in your own life, then please consider giving this video a like. Share it with someone who might need to hear a story of profound discovery and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, so you don't miss out on more true stories that will leave you breathless and make you rethink everything you thought you knew. We're here to bring you the hidden histories, the unbelievable narratives, and the profound human experiences that truly define us. Join us again soon.